Lisa Martinez stood in the middle of the busy plaza, her violin case open at her feet. The morning crowd moved around her, like water flowing around a rock. Aliens of all shapes and sizes walked past, talking in languages she could not understand. Their voices mixed together into a constant buzz of sound that filled the air on Kepler 7 trade station. She lifted her violin to her chin and started to play. The first notes rang out clear and sweet, cutting through the noise of the crowd. A few humans turned their heads to listen, but most of the aliens kept walking. They had heard human music before and did not think much of it. Lisa had been playing in this same spot for 3 months now. Every day she came here with hope in her heart. Every night she went back to her tiny room with barely enough credits to buy food. The dream of going home to Earth felt further away each day. The trade station was huge, bigger than any city Lisa had ever seen on Earth. It floated in space between 3 different star systems, making it the perfect place for dozens of alien races to meet and do business. Humans were one of the newest species to join the galactic community, and they were not very important yet. The human district was small and cramped. Most of the humans there were traders, soldiers, or workers trying to make enough money to get by. Very few were artists like Lisa. Art was seen as a luxury that humans could not afford when they were still proving themselves to the galaxy. Lisa played a sad song that reminded her of rain falling on Earth. A human woman dropped a few small credits into her case and smiled. Lisa smiled back, but inside she felt tired. The credits were not nearly enough. At this rate, she would be stuck on Kepler 7 forever. The aliens walking by came in all shapes and sizes. There were the tall, thin Vortons with their blue skin and extra arms. They moved in groups and spoke in high musical voices. The short, round Bludaks rolled rather than walked, their many eyes looking in different directions as they went about their business. Some aliens looked almost human, while others were so strange that Lisa had to be careful not to stare. There were beings made of crystal that sparkled in the station's artificial light. There were others that looked like walking trees, moving slowly and deliberately through the crowd, but none of them stopped to listen to her music. To them, she was just another human making noise. They had their own forms of art and entertainment that were far more advanced than anything humans could create. Or so they believed. Lisa finished her first song and started another. This one was faster and more cheerful, but still the aliens walked by without stopping. A group of human merchants paused to listen for a few minutes before continuing on their way. They dropped some credits in her case, but not many. She had learned to play the violin when she was very young. Her grandmother had taught her, passing down songs that had been in their family for generations. Lisa loved the way the music could make people feel happy or sad or excited. She loved how it could tell stories without using words. When humans first made contact with alien civilizations, Lisa had dreamed of sharing Earth's music with the galaxy. She imagined concert halls filled with beings from different worlds, all listening to the same beautiful melodies. She thought music would be a language that everyone could understand. She had been wrong. The aliens she met on Kepler 7 did not understand human music at all. They found it too simple, too emotional. Their own music was created with technology that could produce sounds humans could not even hear. They thought human instruments were primitive and boring. The morning crowd began to thin out as aliens went to work or continued their business elsewhere. Lisa played for the few who remained, mostly humans and a handful of curious aliens who had never seen a violin before. They watched her fingers move on the strings, but did not seem to understand what she was doing. A group of young Vorton students stopped to watch. They whispered to each other in their own language, pointing at Lisa's violin with interest. One of them asked her a question, but Lisa could not understand the words. She smiled and nodded anyway, then played a simple melody for them, the Vortons, listened politely, but did not seem impressed. They dropped a few credits in her case more out of politeness than appreciation. Lisa thanked them as they walked away, their voices rising in musical conversation that sounded far more complex than anything she could create with her violin. The artificial sun above the plaza grew brighter as the station's day cycle continued. Lisa wiped sweat from her forehead and checked the credits in her case. It was not much, certainly not enough to buy passage on a ship back to Earth. She would need at least 1,000 credits for that, and she was earning maybe 50 credits. On a good day, she thought about giving up and finding other work. There were always jobs for humans on the station, cleaning, carrying cargo, serving food in restaurants. The work was hard, and the pay was not great, but it was steady. She could save up slowly and eventually make it home. But every time she thought about putting away her violin, something stopped her. Music was not just what she did, it was who she was. Her grandmother had always told her that music was the soul's way of speaking when words were not enough. Lisa believed that was true, even if the aliens did not understand. She started playing again, choosing a song her grandmother had taught her long ago. It was about love that lasted forever, about hope that never died. The melody was simple, but beautiful, filled with emotions that any living being should be able to understand. As she played, Lisa closed her eyes and let the music flow through her. She forgot about the aliens walking by, forgot about the credits in her case, forgot about everything except the song. The violin sang in her hands, telling its story to anyone who would listen. When she opened her eyes again, the plaza looked the same as always. Aliens moved about their business, paying no attention to the human musician in their midst. But Lisa felt better somehow. The music had reminded her why she was here, why she would not give up. She would keep playing day after day until someone finally heard what she was trying to say. She had to believe that somewhere in this vast galaxy of different beings, there was someone who would understand the language of music, someone who would hear her grandmother's songs and know that they meant something important. Lisa did not know that today would be different. She did not know that among the crowd of aliens walking past, there was one who would stop and truly listen. She did not know that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine. She just kept playing, pouring her heart into every note, hoping that someone, somewhere, would hear. The afternoon sun was getting lower when Lisa saw him. He was tall, much taller than any human, with broad shoulders and dark gray skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. His clothes were military. She could tell that much. They were made of some kind of material that looked both tough and expensive. He was a Zephyrian. Lisa had seen a few of them on the station before, but always from far away. They were known throughout the galaxy as the best warriors anyone had ever seen. They never showed emotion and never backed down from a fight. Most other aliens gave them space and spoke to them with respect. This Zephyrian had stopped walking. He stood about 20 feet away from Lisa, his head turned toward her music. His face showed nothing, like a statue carved from stone. But something about the way he held himself told Lisa that he was listening. Lisa had been playing for hours. Her fingers were getting tired, and her shoulder ached from holding the violin up for so long. She had been thinking about packing up and going back to her room. But now, with this strange alien watching her, she felt a new energy flow through her. She started playing a new song. It was one of the hardest pieces she knew, full of high notes that rang out like bells and low notes that rumbled like thunder. The melody told a story of a warrior who fought many battles, but never forgot the home he was fighting for. As she played, Lisa watched the Zephyrian out of the corner of her eye. He had not moved, had not changed his expression, but there was something different about him now. He seemed to be leaning forward slightly, as if trying to catch every note. The song built higher and higher, Lisa's bow flying across the strings. She put everything she had into the music, every bit of skill her grandmother had taught her, every emotion she had felt during her months on this cold station. The violin sang and wailed and whispered, telling stories that had no words. Other aliens in the plaza began to notice the Zephyrian standing still. This was not normal behavior for his kind. Zephyrians moved with purpose. They did not stop to listen to street musicians. A few curious aliens slowed their walking to see what was happening. Captain Krendith had been walking back to his ship when the music reached his ears. At first, he tried to ignore it. Zephyrians did not waste time on such things. They had more important matters to attend to, like duty and honor and the protection of their people. But something about this music was different. It spoke to parts of his mind that he had been taught to keep locked away. The melody reminded him of things he was not supposed to remember. The sound of wind through the crystal forests of his homeworld. The song his mother had hummed when he was very young, before he began his warrior training. The human female playing the instrument was small and fragile-looking. Her dark hair fell around her face as she concentrated on her music. Sweat ran down her forehead from the effort of playing. Her eyes were closed, lost in the song. Krendith had fought in dozens of battles across 3 different star systems. He had seen planets burn and ships explode in the darkness of space. He had lost friends and comrades, had made decisions that cost lives. Through it all, he had remained strong and emotionless, as a Zephyrian warrior should. But this music was doing something to him that no enemy weapon had ever managed. It was reaching inside his chest and touching something that he thought was dead. The melody spoke of loss and longing, of courage in the face of impossible odds. It spoke of the price that warriors paid for their strength. The song reached its highest point, the violin crying out like a voice calling across vast distances. Krendith felt something he had not experienced in 40 years of military service. His bioluminescent markings, the patterns of light that covered his skin, began to pulse very faintly. He tried to control it. Zephyrians only showed their markings during moments of deep spiritual significance or extreme emotion. To display them in public, especially in response to alien entertainment, was considered shameful. But the music would not let him stop. Lisa reached the end of her song and let the last note hang in the air. She opened her eyes and was surprised to see that a small crowd had gathered around her. Most of them were not looking at her, though. They were staring at the tall Zephyrian warrior who stood like a statue in their midst. Krendith realized that others were watching him. He looked down at his arms and saw the faint glow of his markings beneath his uniform. Horror washed over him. He had lost control in front of aliens, something no Zephyrian warrior should ever do. But as he looked at the human musician, he felt something else. The music had shown him things about himself that he had forgotten. It had reminded him that strength was not the same as emptiness, that a warrior could be brave and still feel the weight of what he had seen and done. Lisa did not know what the glowing patterns on the alien skin meant, but she could see that her music had affected him somehow. She had never seen any alien react to her playing like this. Most of them acted like they could not even hear her. She lowered her violin and looked at the Zephyrian. For a moment, their eyes met across the space between them. His eyes were dark and deep, like pools of still water. In them, she saw something that surprised her. Pain, longing, recognition. Then the moment passed. The Zephyrian's expression became blank again, his markings fading back to nothing. But he did not walk away. Instead, he began moving toward Lisa. His steps slow and deliberate. The crowd of aliens parted to let him through. Everyone knew better than to get in the way of a Zephyrian warrior. Lisa felt her heart beating faster as he approached. She had heard stories about his people, about how dangerous they could be when angry. But when Crendith reached her violin case, he did not look angry. He looked confused, like someone trying to solve a puzzle that had too many pieces. He reached into a pocket of his uniform and pulled out something that made Lisa's eyes go wide. It was a credit chip, but not like the small ones that humans usually carried. This one was larger and made of a metal that gleamed like silver. Lisa could see numbers on its surface that made her heart skip a beat. 100 credits. More money than she usually made in a week. Crendith dropped the chip into her violin case without saying a word. Then he looked at her again, and Lisa thought. She saw something like respect in his dark eyes. He nodded once, a small movement of his head that somehow felt like the greatest compliment she had ever received. Then he turned and walked away, his long legs carrying him quickly through the crowd. The other aliens watched him go, whispering to each other in their various languages. Lisa could tell they were as surprised as she was. She looked down at the credit chip glowing in her case. 100 credits from a Zephyrian warrior who had stopped to listen to her music. A warrior whose skin had glowed in response to her violin. Lisa picked up the chip and held it in her shaking hand. For the first time since coming to Kepler 7, she began to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone in this galaxy understood what she was trying to say. The next morning, Lisa woke up early and counted her credits 3 times. The 100-credit chip was still there, still real. She had enough money now to eat well for weeks, maybe even buy new strings for her violin. But more important than the money was what it meant. Someone had listened. Someone had understood. She made her way to the plaza earlier than usual, her violin case feeling lighter in her hands. The morning crowd was just starting to form, early workers and traders beginning their day. Lisa found her usual spot and began to set up. As she tuned her violin, she noticed something different. A few aliens were looking at her as they walked by, not the quick, dismissive glances she was used to, but real looks. Some of them slowed down, as if remembering something they had heard. Word traveled fast on a space station. There were no secrets when thousands of beings from different worlds lived together in a small space. By now, many aliens had heard the story of the Zephyrian warrior who had stopped to listen to human music, who had glowed in response to it. Lisa started playing her first song of the day. It was a gentle melody, soft and welcoming. As the notes floated through the air, she saw more aliens turning their heads. A group of young Vortons whispered to each other, pointing in her direction. She was halfway through the song when she saw him again. Captain Crendith stood at the edge of the plaza, tall and still among the moving crowd. He was not hiding this time. He walked directly toward her, his military boots clicking on the metal floor of the station. Lisa kept playing, but her heart started beating faster. She did not know what to expect. Maybe he regretted giving her the money. Maybe he was embarrassed about what had happened and wanted to make sure it did not happen again. But when Crendith reached her, he did something that surprised everyone watching. He sat down, right there on the floor of the plaza, cross-legged like a child, listening to a story. His dark uniform made a sharp contrast against the bright metal floor. The crowd of aliens stopped moving. Zephyrian warriors did not sit on the ground in public places. They stood at attention or walked with purpose. They certainly did not make themselves comfortable to listen to street music. Lisa finished her song and looked down at the sitting warrior. His face was still blank and serious, but his eyes were fixed on her violin. She could see that he was waiting for her to play again. She started a new song, one of her favorites. It told the story of a soldier coming home after a long war. The melody was both sad and happy, full of the joy of return, but also the memory of what had been left behind on the battlefield. As she played, Crendith's markings began to glow again. This time, he did not try to hide it. The patterns of light under his skin pulsed in rhythm with the music, creating a soft silver glow that rippled across his arms and face. Other aliens began to gather around them. At first, they came to stare at the glowing Zephyrian, but as they listened, something else happened. The music began to affect them too. A group of Christek beings, creatures made of living crystal, started to vibrate softly. Their bodies, which normally stayed perfectly still, began to hum in harmony with Lisa's violin. The sound they made was like bells ringing in the distance. The Etherians, tall beings with pale blue skin and large eyes, swayed gently as they listened. Their empathic abilities let them feel the emotions in Lisa's music directly. Tears began to run down their faces as the melody spoke to them of loss and hope. Even the practical Bludaks, who cared more about business than art, rolled closer to hear better. Their many eyes blinked in patterns that matched the rhythm of the song. Lisa had never seen anything like it. Aliens who had ignored her for months were now standing in a circle around her, all of them responding to her music in their own ways. The plaza had become quiet, except for the sound of her violin and the soft harmonies that the different species were adding to it. She finished the soldier's song and immediately started another. This one was faster, more joyful. It spoke of celebration and friendship, of people coming together despite their differences. As she played, the circle of aliens grew larger. Krendith remained sitting in the front, his markings now glowing brightly enough for everyone to see. He had given up trying to control his response to the music. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to feel what the melodies were telling him. The music reminded him of things his warrior training had taught him to forget. The sound of his sister's laughter before she died in battle. The way his homeworld looked at sunset, with purple light filtering through the crystal trees. The faces of comrades who had not come home from war, but it also reminded him of things worth fighting for. The hope that drove soldiers to keep going when everything seemed lost. The love that made sacrifice meaningful. The honor that came not from winning battles, but from protecting those who could not protect themselves. As Lisa played, she began to understand something important. The aliens were not just listening to her music. They were hearing their own stories in it. The melodies she played spoke a language that went deeper than words, deeper than the differences between species. The Christek beings heard mathematical beauty in the organized sound waves. The Etherians felt emotions they had never experienced before. The Vortons recognized the complex harmonies that their own music tried to create with technology. Even species that seemed to have nothing in common found something to connect with in Lisa's violin. The music became a bridge between worlds, a way for different kinds of minds to understand each other. When Lisa finally stopped playing, the plaza was completely silent. Hundreds of aliens stood around her, all of them affected by what they had heard. Some were crowing. Others were glowing or humming or making whatever sounds their species made when deeply moved. Krendith slowly stood up, his markings still pulsing. With soft light, he looked around at the crowd of aliens, all of them brought together by the music of one small human. Then he looked back at Lisa and nodded again, the same respectful nod he had given her the day before. But this time, he was not alone. One by one, other aliens began to nod as well. The Etherians bowed gracefully. The Christek beings chimed in harmony. The Bludaks rolled in small circles, which Lisa somehow knew was their way of showing approval. Credits began to rain down into her violin case. Not just human credits, but currency from dozens of different worlds. The aliens were not just being polite anymore. They were showing real appreciation for what she had shared with them. As the crowd slowly began to break up, aliens returning to their daily business, Lisa noticed that something had changed. They were looking at each other differently now. The Vortons were talking to the Etherians. The Christek beings were attempting to communicate with the Bludaks, The music had not just entertained them. It had reminded them that despite all their differences, they shared something important. They all had feelings. They all had stories. They all understood what it meant to hope and fear and love and lose. Lisa packed up her violin with hands that shook from excitement and exhaustion. Today had been different from anything she had ever experienced. For the first time since coming to Kepler 7, she felt like she truly belonged here. As she walked back to her room, credits heavy in her case, she did not notice the figure watching her from the shadows. Commander Vextar of the Hegemony had seen everything that happened in the plaza, and he was not pleased. Word about the human musician spread through Kepler 7 like fire through dry grass. By the third day, Lisa's morning concerts had become the most popular entertainment on the station. Aliens would finish their breakfast and head straight to the plaza to hear what she would play. The changes were amazing to see. Species that had barely spoken to each other before were now gathering in mixed groups. Etherians stood next to Christek beings, translating emotions into logical concepts. Vortons shared their advanced musical theories with anyone who would listen. Even the usually grumpy Bludaks seemed friendlier as they rolled through the crowds. Lisa arrived at the plaza each morning to find aliens already waiting for her. They had learned her schedule and came early to get the best spots. Some brought cushions to sit on. Others brought recording devices to capture the music and share it with friends who could not attend. Captain Krenduth had become a regular fixture at her concerts. He still sat in the front, cross-legged and serious, but now other Zephyrians had started joining him. Lisa had learned that Zephyrians never showed emotion in public, which made their glowing markings during her performances even more special. The first time, 3 Zephyrian warriors sat together, all glowing softly to her music. The entire plaza had gone silent in amazement. These were the toughest beings in the galaxy, feared by pirates and respected by everyone. Yet here they were, moved to tears by a human girl with a violin. But Lisa was starting to notice that not everyone was happy about her success. Some aliens watched her concerts with dark expressions. They whispered in corners and pointed at the mixed groups of species enjoying the music together. Commander Vextar of the Hegemony was the most vocal opponent. The Hegemony controlled a large section of this part of the galaxy through fear and strict rules. They believed that emotions made people weak, and that art was a waste of time that distracted from more important things. Vextar had built his career on the idea that different species should stay separate. Each race should focus on what they did best and not waste time trying to understand others. The sight of Zephyrians and Etherians and Christek beings all sitting together, all responding to the same human music, made him angry. He began showing up at Lisa's concerts, standing at the back with a group of his followers. They did not listen to the music. Instead, they watched the crowd, taking notes on which aliens were attending and how they were reacting. Lisa tried to ignore them, but their presence made her nervous. She had heard stories about the Hegemony and what happened to people who got in their way. They had ways of making troublemakers disappear, especially humans who are far from home with no one to protect them. One morning, as Lisa was setting up for her daily concert, Vextar approached her directly. He was a tall, thin alien with gray skin and cold yellow eyes. His uniform was black with silver decorations that showed his high rank in the Hegemony. "Human," he said, his voice like ice. "You are causing problems on this station." Lisa looked up from tuning her violin. Around the plaza, aliens were gathering for her morning performance. She could see Captain Krenduth taking his usual spot, along with several other Zephyrians. The Etherians were arriving in their graceful groups, and the Christek beings were already humming in preparation. "I am just playing music," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice steady. I am not causing any problems. Vextar's yellow eyes narrowed. You are making these species forget their proper places. You are filling their heads with dangerous ideas about cooperation and understanding. This leads to chaos and weakness. Music does not make people weak, Lisa replied. It makes them stronger by showing them what they have in common. Foolish human thinking, Vextar spat. Emotions are weakness. Art is distraction. You are corrupting the natural order of things. Captain Crendith had noticed the conversation and was walking over. His expression was calm, but Lisa could see the tension in his shoulders. Other aliens in the plaza were starting to pay attention too. Is there a problem here? Crendith asked in his deep, quiet voice. Vextar turned to face the Zephyrian warrior. The problem, Captain, is that you and your people have forgotten your duties. You sit on the ground like children, displaying your markings for alien entertainment. This is not the Zephyrian way. Crendith's markings began to glow faintly, not from music this time, but from controlled anger. The Zephyrian way is honor and strength. This human's music has taught me that true strength comes from understanding, not from ignorance. Pretty words, Vextar said with a sneer. But the Hegemony Council sees things differently. They are concerned about the changes happening on this station. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. The Hegemony Council was powerful enough to shut down her concerts if they wanted to. They could ban her from the station or worse. What do you want? She asked. Vextar smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. I want to prove that human art has no real value. I challenge you to a formal demonstration before the Station Council. If you can show that your music truly benefits the species gathered here, then you may continue. If you fail, all human artistic expression will be banned from Kepler-7. The plaza had gone completely quiet. Every alien was listening to the conversation now. Lisa felt hundreds of eyes watching her, waiting to see what she would say. And if I refuse? She asked. Then I will petition the council to remove you immediately. Either way, this ends. The question is whether you want to have a chance to defend yourself or not. Lisa looked around at the faces watching her. She saw the Etherians with their kind, empathetic expressions. The Christek beings hummed softly, their crystal bodies reflecting the plaza's lights. The Zephyrian warriors stood ready to fight for her if needed. These beings had become her friends over the past few days. They had opened their hearts to her music and found something beautiful in it. They deserved better than to have that taken away, because one powerful alien was afraid of change. I accept your challenge, Lisa said, her voice stronger than she felt. Vextar's smile widened. Excellent. The demonstration will be held tomorrow evening in the council chamber. All species representatives will attend. You will have one chance to prove that human music has value beyond mere entertainment. He turned and walked away, his black uniform making him look like a shadow moving through the crowd. Lisa watched him go, her heart pounding with fear and determination. Captain Crendith placed a large, gentle hand on her shoulder. You do not have to face this alone, he said. The music you share has changed many of us. We will stand with you. Other aliens began to gather around Lisa, offering their support. The Etherians promised to help her understand how different species experienced emotion. The Christek beings offered to analyze the mathematical properties of her music. Even the Bludax rolled closer, their many eyes blinking in patterns of encouragement. Lisa realized that what had started as a simple desire to earn enough credits to go home had become something much bigger. She was not just playing music anymore. She was fighting for the right of all species to share in the universal language of art and emotion. Tomorrow night, in front of the most powerful beings on Kepler-7, she would have to prove that a human girl with a violin could build bridges between worlds. The thought terrified her, but as she looked at the faces of her new friends, She felt something else too. Hope. Not the same hope that her grandmother had taught her to put into her music. The hope that said no matter how different people seemed on the outside, they all shared the same basic feelings on the inside. Love, loss, joy, fear, dreams of something better. If she could make the council feel that connection, if she could show them what her music had shown the aliens in the plaza, then maybe she could win. Maybe she could prove that art was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. Lisa picked up her violin and began to play. Tomorrow would be the most important performance of her life, but today she still had friends to play for. The music flowed through the plaza, carrying with it all the hope and love and determination that one small human could hold in her heart. Lisa barely slept that night. She lay in her small room, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what she would play for the station council. This was not just another concert in the plaza. This was a test that could decide the future of human art on Kepler-7. She had spent the day talking with her alien friends, learning about their cultures and what music meant to them. The Etherians had explained how they felt emotions as colors and textures. The Christek beings had shown her the mathematical patterns they saw in her melodies. The Zephyrians had told her about the ancient songs their people used to sing before they became warriors. Each species experienced her music differently, but they all found something meaningful in it. Lisa realized that she needed to create something that would speak to all of them at once. Not just one song, but a musical story that showed how different beings could find common ground. The next evening, Lisa made her way to the council chamber. The hallways were crowded with aliens heading to the same place. Word about the challenge had spread throughout the station. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. The council chamber was the largest room. On Kepler-7, it was built like an arena, with seats rising up in circles around a central stage. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy sat in their designated sections. Lisa had never seen so many different kinds of beings in one place. At the top of the chamber sat the station council, 12 powerful aliens who made the important decisions for Kepler-7. They looked down at the stage with serious expressions, their faces showing no emotion. Captain Krendath and his fellow Zephyrians sat in the military section. Their markings were dim, but Lisa could see the tension in their postures. The Etherians filled their area with soft blue light, their empathic abilities picking up the anxiety in the room. The Christek beings hummed quietly, creating a low harmonic background to the nervous whispers. Commander Vexstar stood near the stage, dressed in his finest black uniform. His yellow eyes gleamed with confidence as he looked at Lisa. Behind him sat his supporters from the hegemony, their faces cold and disapproving. The council leader, an ancient being from a species Lisa did not recognize, called for silence. His voice echoed through the chamber as he explained the challenge. Lisa would have one chance to prove that human music had genuine value for the galactic community. If she failed, all human artistic expression would be banned from Kepler-7. Lisa walked to the center of the stage, her violin case in her hands. The chamber was so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. Thousands of eyes watched her as she opened the case and lifted out her instrument. She looked up at the council and began to speak. Her voice was small in the huge chamber, but the excellent acoustics carried her words to every seat. Honored council members, distinguished beings of all species, she began. Music is not just entertainment. It is the language of the heart, the voice of the soul. Today, I will tell you a story through music. It is the story of all of us. Lisa raised her violin to her chin and began to play. The first notes were simple and pure, like the sound of a single voice calling across empty space. They represented the beginning when each species was alone in their corner of the galaxy, not knowing that others existed. As the melody developed, other voices joined in. Lisa used different techniques on her violin to create multiple harmonies, each one representing a different species, discovering they were not alone. The music grew more complex as these voices found each other, sometimes clashing, sometimes blending. In the Zephyrian section, markings began to glow. The warriors recognized their own strength and honor in the driving rhythms Lisa created. The Etherians swayed gently, feeling the emotions of discovery and wonder that the music portrayed. Lisa moved into the second part of her story. This was about first contact, about the fear and excitement of meeting beings completely different from yourself. The violin sang of misunderstandings and conflicts, of the difficulty of communication across vast differences in thought and culture. The Christek beings began to vibrate in harmony with the mathematical patterns they heard in the music. Their crystal bodies created bell-like tones that added to Lisa's melody. The Vortons in their section started humming, their musical voices joining the growing symphony. But Lisa was not done. The third part of her story was about learning and growth. She played melodies that showed how different species could teach each other, how their unique perspectives could create something beautiful when combined. The music swirled through the Yao chamber, picking up contributions from different alien species as it went. What had started as one human voice had become a chorus of dozens of different sounds, all working together to create something none of them could have made alone. Commander Vexstar watched with growing alarm as the chamber filled with alien responses to the music. This was exactly what he had been trying to prevent. The beings were forgetting their proper places, mixing together in ways that threatened the established order. Lisa reached the climax of her performance. She played a melody that spoke of unity without uniformity, of strength through diversity. The violin soared above the harmonic contributions of the alien audience, weaving all their different voices into a single magnificent song. Even some of Vexstar's supporters were beginning to respond to the music, their rigid postures soft as the melodies spoke to parts of themselves they had tried to suppress. A few of them began to glow or hum, or make whatever sounds their species made when deeply moved. The council members themselves were not immune. The ancient council leader leaned forward in his seat, his eyes wide with amazement. Other council members showed their own species signs of emotional response. Lisa brought her performance to a close with a soft, gentle melody that spoke of hope for the future. It was a promise that beings from different worlds could work together, learn from each other, and create something beautiful together. As the last note faded away, the chamber was completely silent. Lisa lowered her violin and looked up at the council, her heart pounding. She had given everything she had to that performance. Now she could only wait for their judgment. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then, slowly, one alien began to applaud. It was Captain Krendeth, his large hands creating a steady rhythm. Other Zephyrians joined him, their glowing markings pulsing in time with the clapping. The Etherians began their own form of appreciation, a melodic humming that filled their section with beautiful sound. The Christek beings chimed in harmony, their crystal bodies ringing like bells. The Vortons sang, the Bludaks rolled in circles, and dozens of other species showed their approval in their own ways. Even some of the hegemony supporters were applauding, though they tried to hide it from Commander Vexstar. The chamber filled with a cacophony of sounds as every species expressed their appreciation in their own unique way, but the most important responses came from the council members themselves. One by one, they stood and showed their approval. The ancient council leader rose last of all, his expression thoughtful and moved. Commander Vexstar stood alone in the center of it all, his face dark with anger and defeat. His plan to discredit human art had backfired completely. Instead of proving that music was worthless, Lisa had shown that it was one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The council leader raised his hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, he looked down at Lisa with something that might have been respect. "Young human," he said, his ancient voice carrying clearly through the room. "You have shown us something remarkable today. Your music has done what centuries of diplomacy could not accomplish. You have reminded us that beneath all our differences, we share the same capacity for beauty, for emotion, for connection." Lisa felt tears running down her face as the full meaning of his words sank in. She had done it. She had proven that human art had value, that music could build bridges between the most different beings in the galaxy. But she was about to discover that her victory would lead to something even more amazing than she had imagined. The council leader stepped forward, his ancient eyes bright with excitement. "What we have witnessed tonight changes everything," he announced to the chamber. "This human has shown us that art is not weakness, but the greatest strength any species can possess." Lisa stood on the stage, still holding her violin, unable to believe what was happening. The entire chamber was buzzing with conversation as aliens talked excitedly to each other. Species that had barely spoken before were now sharing ideas and emotions inspired by the music they had just experienced together. "The council has made a decision," the leader continued. "Not only will human artistic expression be welcome on Kepler 7, but we hereby establish the first interspecies cultural exchange program. This human, Lisa Martinez, will serve as its first ambassador." The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Aliens of every kind stood and showed their approval in dozens of different ways. Lisa felt dizzy as the full meaning of the announcement hit her. She was not just allowed to keep playing music. She was being asked to help create something that had never existed before. Captain Krendeth was the first to reach the stage. His markings glowed brightly as he approached Lisa, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw him smile. It was a small expression, barely visible, but it transformed his entire face. "You have given my people a great gift," he said. Quietly, "You have shown us that strength and emotion are not enemies but partners. We have forgotten how to feel without losing our honor. Your music has taught us how to remember." Other aliens began gathering around the stage. The Etherians floated down gracefully, their blue light pulsing with joy. The Christek beings chimed in harmony as they approached, their crystal bodies reflecting the stage lights in rainbow patterns. Even Commander Vextar's supporters were abandoning him, drawn by the celebration happening around Lisa. The hegemony leader stood alone, his face twisted with rage and defeat. He had tried to prove that emotions made beings weak, but Lisa's music had shown the opposite. The strongest beings in the galaxy were the ones brave enough to feel. "This is not over," Vextar snarled as he pushed through the crowd toward the exit. The hegemony will not accept this madness. But no one was listening to him anymore. The chamber was filled with beings who had discovered something wonderful about themselves and each other. They were too busy celebrating to pay attention to one angry alien's threats. Lisa found herself surrounded by representatives from dozens of species, all eager to share their own cultural treasures with her. The Vortons wanted to show her their advanced musical technologies. The Etherians offered to teach her about emotional harmonics. The Christek beings promised to help her understand the mathematical beauty hidden in sound waves. But what touched Lisa most were the Zephyrians. These proud warriors who had spent centuries hiding their feelings were now openly glowing with joy. They told her about the ancient songs of their people, melodies that had been forbidden for generations because they made warriors feel too much. "We would like to remember how to sing again," Krendeth said. "Will you help us?" Lisa nodded, tears running down her face. This was beyond anything she had ever dreamed of. She had come to Kepler 7 as a struggling musician trying to earn enough credits to go home. Now she was being asked to help rebuild the cultural heritage of entire civilizations. The following weeks, Lisa's life changed completely. The interspecies cultural exchange program grew rapidly as word spread throughout the galaxy. Beings from hundreds of worlds sent representatives to Kepler-7, all eager to share their art and learn from others. Lisa's daily concerts in the plaza became formal events attended by diplomatic missions and cultural delegations. But she still played for the regular aliens too, the workers and traders and families who had been her first audience. The changes on Kepler-7 were remarkable to see. The different species districts began to blend together as aliens moved freely between areas that had once been separated by invisible barriers. Mixed groups became common, with beings from different worlds working together on projects they never could have imagined before. The Zephyrians started a choir, their deep voices creating harmonies that made their markings glow in beautiful patterns. The Etherians opened an emotion therapy center where they helped other species understand and process their feelings. The Christek beings began creating mathematical art that was both logical and beautiful. Even the Vortons, with their advanced technology, found new inspiration in the simple melodies Lisa had shared with them. They created instruments that could reproduce the sounds of any species, allowing for musical collaborations that had never been possible before. Lisa established a school where young beings from different worlds could learn about each other's cultures. She taught violin to anyone who wanted to learn, from tiny Bluedick children to ancient Etherian elders. The sight of a classroom filled with different species, all working together to create music, became one of the most popular attractions on the station. The program's success spread beyond Kepler-7. Other stations and planets began establishing their own cultural exchange programs. Art and music became tools for diplomacy, helping to solve conflicts that traditional negotiations had failed to address. Lisa often thought about the 100-credit tip that had started it all. That single generous gesture from a Zephyrian warrior had changed not just her life, but the lives of countless beings throughout the galaxy. It had proven that sometimes the smallest acts of appreciation could have the biggest consequences. One evening, as Lisa finished her daily concert, she found Captain Krendith waiting for her as usual. He had become one of her closest friends, and his support had been crucial in making the cultural exchange program successful. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his uniform pocket. He pulled out another credit chip, but this one was different. Instead of showing a monetary value, it displayed symbols from dozens of different species. "What is it?" Lisa asked. "A gift from all of us," Krendith replied. "It represents something more valuable than money. It represents the gratitude of every being whose life you have touched with your music." Lisa took the chip and felt its weight in her hand. It was warm, as if it contained the emotions of everyone who had contributed to it. She looked around the plaza, now filled with aliens from dozens of worlds, all living and working together in harmony. She had never made it back to Earth, but she realized she no longer wanted to leave. Kepler-7 had become her home in a way that nowhere else ever could. This was where she belonged, surrounded by friends from across the galaxy, sharing the universal language of music with anyone who wanted to listen. As she packed up her violin, Lisa smiled at the memory of her grandmother's words. Music was indeed the soul's way of speaking when words were not enough. But her grandmother had never imagined that those same melodies could speak to souls from distant stars, bridging the gap between worlds and creating connections that would last forever. The 100-credit song had become something much greater than anyone could have predicted. It had become the foundation for a new kind of civilization, one built not on fear or power, but on the shared recognition that beauty, emotion, and art were the things that made life worth living, no matter what planet you called home. And in the center of it all, a young human woman with a violin continued to play, her music carrying the hopes and dreams of countless beings into the vast, welcoming darkness of space.